in the middle of a snowy trail, or going down a mountain on a mountain bike, or out by yourself on a farm road. To me, cycling brings you really close to the physical beauty of an area.
Thank you for joining me today. My guest today is Mike Richter, 14-year career with NHL, and is still involved with hockey, but has definitely enjoyed cycling through the years, and now more so than ever, from transportation to just all around good fun. So we'll just start off with, you were involved with for most people, wouldn't really put cycling and hockey together. So what piqued your interest in cycling? Was there a person or an event that really started this relationship between your relationship between cycling?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on. And I love talking all things bikes, as every little kid in my neighborhood did. That was your source of freedom. I grew up in the 70s in Philadelphia, and we all had the Stingray bikes, and we could hop on that and go down to the local pizza parlor, or shopping center, or just down to your buddy's house. We did everything from setting up ramps in our backyard and launching ourselves, to just getting back and forth. And for us, it was, you never had to rely on anybody else. You could hop on your bike and go quite a distance. And we did it. I can recall one time that we were actually up on the highway near our house, and got pulled over by the police because we were going to a pet store. And the guy's like, "No, you're not. Get off the highway." We were just on the shoulder of the road, having no clue. But that's what we felt with the bikes. That was our form of transportation and fun. And we would play out in the street, a small street where I grew up outside of Philadelphia, and play run over. We try to, have kids sprint back and forth on the street and run them over. But it was everything. That just gave you such an opportunity to get outside and have your own world. And I guess a lot has changed and a lot hasn't. I'm now retired from the sport of hockey. I use bikes for training as long as I can remember. I love being outside. Our training was very specific. So it wasn't long, slow bike rides. It was short sprints as a goaltender. And now, being retired, I use bikes for still transportation and certainly fun. But it's my primary form of exercise. And I love it. I love the gadgetry, the technology, the freedom that it still gives me, and being able to see different parts of the world. I'm not on a great tour like the pros are, but I've gone with my brothers and friends to Europe to cycle, and it's a great way of seeing places. So yeah, there's not really any aspects of bicycling I don't love.
What would you agree that cycling is very social and it's always changing then, as an overall statement?
100%. I did most of my training as an athlete alone. I love that. I'd push myself. I didn't want to be slowed down by anybody else. When I went, how hard I went was dictated by my own schedule and my own needs. But I really found, as I've gotten older, it is a great source of friendship and socialization. I can find that people will push me further than I'd want to go. We had mentioned earlier the fondos and some of these centuries that you sign up for. It gives you something to focus on, and it may scare you enough to get your training a little bit more in depth. When I was heading over to Europe for the first time, there's some pretty big hills there, and you want to actually continue to pedal your bike, not walk it. So there was great motivation to train. And I find that you can really learn an awful lot. But the socialization aspect, I run a small company right now in the environmental space and sustainability, and we really are in the energy space specifically. And here in the East Coast, I'm outside of New York. It's less so in California, but you see more and more where cycling is the new golf, and you have a lot of business connections. And I frankly do a lot of charity rides and whatnot with some former players and current cyclists that are fantastic. It's an amazing way to bring awareness to causes, and certainly bring money to it. So I would prefer to be out there for hours on the bicycle rather than other forms of connection, because it's enjoyable.
do you find any like of your time in the NHL and what you've seen if you watch the tour and the racing here in the States or over in Europe, do you see any similarities between the sports? Or I mean, I mean, on the face of it, you see cycling is more like an individual sport and hockey
Yeah.
much more of a team sport. But there are definitely roles within the cycling for those bigger races. So is there anything that you pick up on between like, oh man, like that's so like, there are some actual similarities between the two?
Absolutely. And you're exactly right. On the surface, it looks so different. I mean, a long training ride for me when I played was an hour, now it's a short ride, just because you had very different, it was all sprints. And as I started learning a little bit, I went back to school and was on a cycling club at Yale when I went back, and I learned so much from some really good athletes there. And one older friend of mine described cycling as a chess match at 30 miles an hour. You have to know where your opponents are, what your team is. Are you leading somebody out? And the different types of races, the crits and the multi-day events. But understanding the roles on the team, and I love watching the tour. I always have. But I mean, my world stops when the Tour de France goes on, for example, just how beautiful it is, and hearing Phil Liggett talk, and now Christian Vanderbilt. There's just Bob Roll. These are great guys. Give you great insight into very specifically the strategy that's going on. And your role may be different than my role in the team. Everybody thinks of it as an individual sport, and all sports, if it's a team-oriented sport, you better know what your role is and you're a piece of the puzzle. And everybody's got to be firing and doing their role and just their role very, very well in order to have success. And the minute you start gliding into someone else's responsibility, you start screwing things up. The minute you don't handle your own responsibility properly, you're screwing things up. So it really, I've learned a ton about it, and it's a really enjoyable thing to learn. And I have a great appreciation because there's, you watch these guys bombing along through the Alps or Pyrenees, and you don't get a sense for how hard it is until you try it. And I've ridden some of those roads over in Europe and done things like Mount Ventoux and whatnot. And just to turn the pedals, I was pretty strong when I retired, and I couldn't believe the power output these guys do at probably a third less weight than I'm carrying. So it's really, they're impressive athletes. And I just find it to be an amazing sport. One that compels you for so many reasons, not just the raw speed and power, but the skill and the technology and the strategy.
So when, well, you just touched on the last bit there on the technology bit. So, I mean, looking from when you started in the NHL to kind of now with how many leaps and bounds has like technology changed in the NHL space, then you look over at cycling. I mean, it seems like that's like a pretty integral part to the sport. And like most people really don't think about that, but it's just like, well, if you're like me and you kind of watch the GCN stuff and like they're counting grams and they're like, and it's like, oh man, this is like, so just like a little bit faster, you save a couple extra watts, but like, is there definitely a similarity that like hockey players sort of think the same way in terms of the technology a little bit, like from the skates or from their stick at all?
I think you have to in a lot of ways. There are those weight weenies equivalent in hockey for sure. But if you're serious about your craft, you are going to do everything you possibly can to give yourself an edge. And I know when I played, hockey has a lot of equipment. Goaltending in particular, my position had just a ton of equipment, and that is an extension of you. That's an extension of your arm, your leg. If you don't feel comfortable in that, it's like not feeling comfortable in your own skin. I have to not be able to think about it. I have to know, like driving a car in and out of a garage, where it's going to hit, where it's not going to. And so when the puck's coming to me, if it's to a screen, I want to know where my blocking area is, and I want to be able to move seamlessly, but I also want to have enough protection so I don't get hurt. And there's this balance between getting a feel for the puck and not getting injured, because you can take all of your pads out and really feel the puck, but you could end up breaking something. The changes in technology in hockey have come from the materials, these composite one-piece hockey sticks are unbelievable. What you can do. I've got 3 boys that play hockey, and just at a young level, they just put a little bit of effort into it, and that puck flies. And it's equivalent of looking at the materials that frames are made out of. You know, the general frame has kind of not changed dramatically over time. Certainly, there's the wind resistance and wind tunnel testing and all that influences its shape, but it's that triangle is kind of the same. But look at the materials and the lightness of it. And even something like electronic shifting, I just went, all right, that's kind of, do you really need it? And then you try it and you go, my gosh, these guys are on the bike for 5-6 hours. It makes a difference. It's very exacting. It doesn't go out of true. I'm overwhelmed from hockey to golf, but particularly when it comes to bicycling. The feel of these machines, they're so precise. I mean, it's still the most efficient means of transportation you have for, every bit of energy you put into it, how fast you go. And the bikes out there now, it's kind of how computers were a decade ago. All of a sudden, nobody makes a bad one. I mean, you just pick one off the rack and they're all amazing. Obviously, the Treks and the Specialized and are just going to be cutting edge and beautiful technology. But even low-end bikes now are so good compared to what they once were. So I have a hard time I see people with car collections. I have a hard time not looking at every bike and having a little bit of wanting to, if I could, I'd have 100 bikes, honestly.
Well, and so how many bikes do you have?
Great
right
question. You probably have, as Nike started parsing out these thin little areas. This is this is a gravel running shoe. This is a sprinting shoe. This is a tennis shoe. Remember, you used to just have a sneaker, one. You end up doing the same thing. I've got a mountain bike. I've got a road bike. I've got a gravel bike. I've got a fat bike. And they literally are used for different things. I love riding a bike in the snow. It's unreal. I do it upstate New York a lot, up in Lake Placid, where I've got a place. I went to high school there. So, that whole culture around it is so great. I've got friends that are strictly mountain bike guys, and then others that are strictly road guys. And all of them have, their reasons for it and disparage the other guys. But I really love it all. I mean, the idea of being able to go as far as you can on a bike. I was never a great runner, frankly, never a great endurance athlete. I was okay. But again, my life was all short bouts of sprints. But to go out on a bike right now, it's, mid-October in the Northeast, the leaves are changing, the air is crisp, and you can cover amazing amounts of ground. Go out for a 50-mile ride and you'll see there's so much beauty out there right now. But an early summer morning, same thing. To me, I get lost in my thoughts. It's my meditation. It's my stress relief. It's my workout. I think about my job. I think about, life. I think about everything. And it just is, whether you're in the middle of a snowy trail or, going down a mountain on a mountain bike, or out by yourself on a farm road. To me, cycling brings you really close to the physical beauty of an area. I mean, you're in Colorado, and gosh, I played in the minors there. It's just overwhelming, the open space. I'd like to get out west more. I've got 2 boys that are playing in British Columbia hockey right now, and I got a friend who lives there, and I've ridden with them out there. And I mean, the scale of west part of North America is crazy, but, pick your spot. I mean, the Eastern farmland is amazing. Vermont, upstate New York, right around the New York area where I am, New York City area, spectacular. So, there's not too many places that aren't good for bikes, in my opinion, and some are just better than others, and you want to experience them all.
So you mentioned a little bit on the transportation side of things, like what kind of errands do you do, or are you just going to a friend's house to have a happy hour via bike, or what do you use the bike for?
My office, I'm lucky. I live in Connecticut, and it's right across the New York border. Is 10 miles from my house, and I can find that I can get there very quickly, and it's a nice way of doing it. There's a gym right near my office. This is pre-COVID, of course, and now we're kind of at home mostly. But I could shower at the gym, go to my office, have a full day, and then ride home. And it kind of clears your mind on the way to work and clears your mind on the way home. And you get miles in there. I mean, if you want to push yourself, you certainly can. There's plenty of hills, and I can take a direct route for 10 miles, or, add a few and get 20 miles each way. So I just like the idea of you're carbon free, you're getting your exercise in, you're relieving stress. Look, it's crowded here in the East, and there's always that kind of competition for space on the roads. These are narrow old roads where I live, and I drive cars too, and I get it. People don't want bikes on the road, but to me, that's just one less car that I'm driving behind when I see a biker. I think it's great. I wish more people would commute by bikes, and I would love to go over to Copenhagen or some of the European cities that really have it set up for cycling. I think it's an amazing, form of transportation. It's fun. I always think of those pictures of Einstein on a bike, and I'm 54. I'm still entertained by I sometimes take work calls and drive around in circles on my driveway. As insane as that is, to me, it's relaxing. And, you can turn yourself inside out and get a hell of a workout on a bike, or just have the most relaxing time ever. But the more that the infrastructure starts to accommodate two wheels, it's a really good thing. And I see more, whether it's New York City or dedicated bike paths and whatnot. I mean, you can almost go, I'm about 25, 30 miles from center of Manhattan. I can almost go down there on bike paths without really getting on many roads. It's pretty cool. And when the weather changes and the light goes dim, I've got lights for my bikes and all that on the commuters. It makes a difference, because it's obviously a dangerous thing to be out on the road. You can't expect all cars to see you. So you're starting to get this infrastructure that allows you to use these surfaces more and more. So yeah, it's primarily going back and forth to work. But I mean, literally, I've gone down to Manhattan and picked up a sandwich, eaten it with a friend, and come back just for the fun of it, But yeah, I think the more the culture demands real infrastructure. And I think, you hear about that last mile of transportation. I can take Metro North into the city, and it's an amazing thing. The railway system around New York is fantastic. But how do I get from my house to the railway system? And so, covered parking on bikes and more bike lanes and whatnot can be an amazing thing. And, what a lot of people who don't appreciate bikes don't understand is that's one less car in your way. It's a bike. You can get around him very, very fast. He's not making noise. He's not polluting. And he's probably a less stressful individual and in better shape. So there's a lot to argue for people commuting by bike.
And have you seen an uptick in New York with since March, when all of this really started, and we've seen just more and more people riding bikes? Have you seen just that in your circles that you run in, like you're out on the trails or out on the road or just on the gravel or just on if you ride into Manhattan at all right now, are you just seeing more people out?
I actually do. I think in the beginning, when COVID really struck hard in March here, people were kind of horrified because the hospitals were overflowing and everything else. You didn't know quite what to do. Then you realize you can't stay in forever. And biking is an amazing thing. I can be outside where it's safe. I can do it alone or with a friend that I know who is safe too, and as far as being tested or anything else. And I really noticed an uptick. And the bike shops were hurting, as every business seemed to be in the beginning, because people literally just stayed home. And then they started selling bikes. I mean, it's an amazing way. You weren't going to the gym as much, but there you are on these roads that have less cars, less people commuting, and it felt like you own the road. It was an amazing thing. I've done the 5-borough tour in New York, where they close off a lot of the bridges and highways and whatnot to go through a city that is dedicated to biking. In New Haven, they would shut down certain areas on the weekends, and you could ride bikes through there. Same thing in Philadelphia on the West River Drive. Spectacular to go out there and not even have in your consciousness that you're going to get run over. It's a really cool thing. There's other bikers, there's people walking their dogs. It changes the pace and the stress level. And that's what it felt like outside. There was a park near me that I cut through. It was just drop dead gorgeous. Probably I have a mile and a half to cut through it. It's really worth seeing. A lot of open space, beautiful in Westchester. And it was just wall to wall people walking, riding bikes. It was really good to see. And I think a lot of people started appreciating just the simple act of riding a bike, the freedom it provides. But during the lockdown, it's been for a lot of people, certainly for me, it's been a godsend. It's been an amazing way to keep some sanity.
have you been able to like share the love of cycling with others and with those that you ride with, but also those that like have not really looked truly at a bike before, and it's like you get them out there for, and this is maybe like their third or fourth ride, and you just see them smiling from ear to ear, or something like that, where it's just like, this is like sharing. I don't know, I just find it very cool when I can take someone out on a new road, new trail, and like they get down and it's just, they're like grinning from ear to ear. Like, have you had experiences like that with your time
I
on the
have,
bike?
probably primarily with my own kids. I've got 3 boys, and to teach them to ride, and they pick it up quickly, and to go out on a mountain bike ride or anything else up in Lake Placid. I've taken my all 3 of them out, and really fun to have a cousin there and just go, let's go experience this. They have a good trail system there, and it's spectacularly pretty and really fun to just go out there and lose yourself in the woods. And there's great bank turns and little jumps and hucks everywhere. And um, I, I've never had anybody out there, even experienced guys, that don't walk away, go, that was really great. I had the pleasure of doing a charity event, Bike for High, with George Hincapie. The guy's put some miles on, and he still says, gosh, that's beautiful. And he still enjoys it. It's just so impressive. Christian Vandervelde, the same thing. I've gotten to know him through that same charity and bombed around Westchester, and these guys still love the process of just turning the pedal. And whether you have, Tour de France experience like those guys, or you're a first timer, or someone loved it as a kid and is coming back as an adult, which a lot of people have through the COVID, it's pretty cool to see. It's just, I went by an older gentleman, blinking everything with a look like a work vest on from, like a road crew. But pedaling it up on an old jalopy, and he looked like, he was struggling to get up a hill, but he had that smile on his face, and you're like, man, that's pretty cool. Like, if you can, again, make it safe for everybody on the road, that you share the road, and to have that experience, healthier people, less stress, less congested roads. It's a really good thing. So yeah, I think the US in particular has had such an uptick, I suppose, really going back from Greg LeMond, and people rediscovered that biking, and it's here to stay. And there's been sort of a rediscovery in this last half year, forced, unfortunately, through this pandemic. But you can't get rid of your workouts altogether just because the gym might have closed its doors. You have to do something on your own, and what better than going out and riding a bike in the fresh air?
Yeah. Do you think cycling is here to stay? Do you think, like, looking in the future, in like a little bit, 5 years time or something like that, do you think there's just more and more? I mean, we have a long way to catch up in terms of the likes of Copenhagen or Amsterdam or anything like that. But I think, for me personally, I think cycling is definitely here to stay in a greater scheme than what it has been in the, like, between, well, we had the big oil crisis in the 70s, and we saw this huge uptick in bike sales, and then it just went back down as people went back to driving and not really focusing too much on bikes. But I think hopefully now there's a change and a shift in mindset there. Do you see that same thing on your end?
Oh, I think so. I just, I talked at the beginning of this show about, as a kid, we seemed to own the roads, and it was a small, quiet town that I lived in. But now there's just so much more infrastructure and awareness. I mean, is it hard for you to find a cycling group nearby? I probably have 10 within, a 10-mile radius of me that I could join. There's bike shops everywhere, and they promote this, from the, top level hard trainers to, a 60-year-old woman who wants to go out on a bike for the first time in decades. There's so much availability. And as we also said, the equipment's amazing. Get on any bike now. They're absolutely a joy to ride. The brakes work. There's just so much technology that's trickled down from the cutting edge stuff that you have to have on the tour to be able to survive. You get disc brakes on a couple $100 bike now. The integrated shifting that came out, that changed how people, have to ride. Your head's not down looking at that down tube and everything else. It just, this is user friendly. Like cars have gotten so much more intuitive. Bikes have too. And, you know, as the demographics change to an aging population, there's so much knowledge around fitting a bike. You know, maybe I have a bad back, so I have to have one with a more upright angle, seat tube, whatever it is. You're not just chucking this big hunk of steel and saying, go out and figure it out. You're saying, let's adjust this to you. Oh, you're coming through an injury. We can move this as you get your range of motion back. Go to most any bike store, and they're pretty sophisticated in terms of not just their technical knowledge, but I think the human aspect of it. You know, what do you hope to get out of this? Are you racing? Are you putting food on your table? Or are you just going out for a Saturday afternoon here and there, but you don't want to hurt yourself? I think it's here to stay in a way, only keep getting better. You know, we may be slow to the table in some ways in terms of Europe, but Americans get into things and they get into them pretty well. And yeah, look at your average city now has bike lanes that you couldn't have dreamed about 20 years ago. It's really changing. And I just think there's too much fun and too much practical benefit from these bikes for it to go the other way.
Very cool. So what kind of to close out on what has been like an all-time memory for you with the bike? I mean, I'm sure you've got so many. I mean, and you've shared so many just now. Like, but is there anything? Was it that first bike that you rode? That first, like, taking your training wheels off to doing no hands, or just like, or now like just doing like showing your kids what it means to ride a bike and have fun?
I still remember the first bike. I had older brothers and sisters, so I had a lot of hand-me-downs, you know, girls and boys bikes, and anything that would work was great. It worked. But I remember getting my first bike, and I was so proud of it. It was from Sears, and my dad and I put it together. And we actually put the handlebars on backwards, so the stem was facing me as opposed to out. And I came down the street feeling like $1 million, and everybody's like, "Your bike's backwards," and I'm like, right back home, back to the shop. But I mean, these were expressions of yourself, and we'd put decals on them, we'd ramp them, and we'd, you know, everything from the baseball cards and the spokes and all that. And so those are great memories. But you know, I have so many positive experiences on a bike. It's amazing. Great people that I met and places I've seen. But going to Europe with my brothers and doing shadowing some of the Tour de France was jaw-droppingly beautiful. You're eating great food and wine, and you're getting workouts in that are unbelievable, and you're staying in these just absolutely stunning places in a place that has total acceptance of the bike culture. It's been there forever, and they appreciate it, and they respect, that means of transportation, old, young, thin, fat, fast, slow. It's all accepted. And that was an amazing thing, how difficult it was, but also how beautiful it was. So yeah. And what's really cool is there's so many places in North America and in America in particular to ride bikes and experience, these great, just a local fondo can give you a perspective on an area I've got a brother that has a place in New Jersey, and parts of Jersey are unbelievable for biking. To go up to New England, there's a farm to fork fondo nearby me that's 5 or 6 different areas from Amish country up to Vermont. And every one of those things, I have a hard time figuring out which one's best. There's great food, great people, and, a great workout in as pretty of an area as you could possibly do. I've had great rides in the rain and cold and beautiful sunny days. So I'll take them all. Even a bad ride's a good ride.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you for sharing your part of your Tuesday with us here at Cycling. So
never a bad day talking about bikes. So yeah, I appreciate having me on, and get out there and pedal. It's the best thing in the world.
Thank you.
Yeah, take it easy.